Today being a very core concept to the parents themselves, right? I would also want to look into the couple, a very important support function in all of this activities. Where do the parents really feature? And we also want to see a quick, guide of those common errors, as you can see the website presentation itself talking about, where, you could improve on, make your applications go through in that perfect. Now, I think we'll just get started across with the presentation itself, right? And we will be just discussing those various different aspects. Before we get into the, actual aspects of those common mistakes, just want to quickly run you through with the organization first. Again, as we just introduce ourselves, Let's Unbound, the organization, began with a complete focus on skill building, empowering elementary and middle school students with STEM, life skills, and mentorship. As these school students progressed to high school, they started seeking out college admissions guidance. And that's where we listened. We evolved our services to seamlessly integrate the storytelling through the applications into our already well established mentoring programs. Now, by combining personalized learning, skill development, and strategic admission support, we guide students right from their early academic years to top global universities. So, today we have impacted more than 4,000 students across 25 countries, delivering more than a lakh 25,000 hours of expert mentoring. Our commitment to excellence has earned us a 4.9 over a 5 global rating. We are proud to have partnered with prestigious organizations as STEM.org, Harvard Students Agencies, Arizona State University Prep Digital. So at Let's Unbound now, we're not just preparing students for a specific course or a skill, but we're preparing them for their whole academic journey, starting right from primary years, elementary years, and into those applications in your high school years. And with an idea that this preparation should lead to an ideal undergraduation experience and eventually your complete life in that sense. Before we move on to the flow of our presentation, a little bit of an introduction to the people behind the organizations, my other two partners, the co-founders. On your left, you've got Amol, who's a serial entrepreneur. He's an education visionary. Both of us were actually batchmates from MBA as well. He's got experiences with Tata and Exceed post the MBA, and he has, which was and Exceed, which was basically India's largest edtech platform, has helped scale impactful educational solutions across 2,000 countries in across 2,000 schools in 6 countries, and impacting more than 250,000 students. On your right, you've got Nishant. He's a mentor, he's an educator, and brains behind many of the learning pathways that we constantly do share. With 14 plus years of experiences across academia industry, he has counseled over 1,000 students and has designed curriculum solutions right from K-12 to executive MBA programs. Now, Nishant has been very instrumental and a proud member under Mentor of Change under and Atal Innovation Niti Aayog. A quick look into my own profile as the other co-founder with the organization. I've got 12 years of experience post my in counseling and consultancy. I've worked with organizations as Jaguar Land Rover, Citibank, and Standard Chartered in the past. Within education, I started my journey actually with Crimson Education and Added Education, and eventually joined on board as a co-founder, specifically focused on the strategizing aspect behind every application that we send out today. Now, before now giving you a quick view of what you should be expecting, right at this session. So before we start, here's exactly, what you would walk away from today's session. First, I'll quickly clarify how does US versus UK admissions actually look and work. And most importantly, why do parents get confused? Now, because most mistakes happen when we apply the UK logic specifically, and more importantly, a lot of Indian parents trying to see the Indian logic to the US application, or also vice versa, where you're trying to look into the US logic and just thinking because UK is another international country different from India, so it's the same thing as applying to USA. So you do not want to also take the US logic into UK. I'll also share a very simple mental model to decide for any activity or decision where it really belongs either to the US bucket or to the UK bucket. Second, we'll cover really 12 costly mistakes that I have identified through, my years within this counseling aspect. Now, this is the kind that don't look wrong on the surface, but they quietly reduce the strength of your application. They may look right in terms of the experiences that you would have gathered by seeing other applications, but that doesn't pretty much mean it really fits perfectly with your profile. So these are those hidden point loss areas. And for each mistake, I'll tell you the warning sign to look at for at home straightforward. You can catch it really early on, not very specifically in a that panic mode that may come in while you're already in. Third, I'll show you what you do instead. Simple upgrades that don't require your child to do, let's say, 30, 40 different new things, just smarter choices, better sequencing, and most importantly, the clear positioning. So outcomes improve really faster in this model. Think of it like rearranging the same ingredients into a stronger recipe, less noise, more signal, and much more credibility while creating a strong positioning. And finally, I'll share you our approach, our practical resources, so you have a clear method and tools you can use immediately instead of just leaving today with theory. So the promise is with this session, it's clarity, mistakes to avoid, and how we can suggest you our approach and resources that will take you through this journey. Now, why do, I would say small mistakes cost big? The headline is simple. Selectivity and timing compound. One small slip doesn't really reduce your chances a little. It'll reduce them at that exact moment that's its highest. So first point, selectivity. Top institutions are small relative to demand. Even very strong are competing in a crowded pool. And when thousands of applications look good enough, tiny differences really start to decide those outcomes. That's why, slightly late, slightly generic, slightly inconsistent can push an application out. Now, the second thing is really important, the timing. Last minute planning doesn't just create stress, it produces predictable weaknesses. So, for example, you've got those weaker essays coming through, you'd have rushed up submissions, letter of recommendations being extremely generic, and importantly, those avoidable deadline mistakes, not having a TMUA result ready in your hand, delaying that SAT paper to the last point. And the worst part is these are not talent issues. These are just execution issues, issues, which are totally preventable if you only have a timeline prepared and owned up early. Third point is coherence. In both the system, you're applying USA, you're applying UK, the application has to really aligned to your profile. Your academics, your activities, and your writing must tell the exact same story. You cannot be two, three, four different people just because those documentations are changing. And do remember, that is how an admission officer is catching you. He's asking exactly that same profile through different perspectives. And if you are not having a coherence, what he's understanding that either of these documents are fabricated. So if the student says they love one area in one document, but the transcript is telling a different story in terms of numerics, the activities are showing a different narrative, and your personal statement or your essays or the LORs are not touching base on that profile description, the application will feel scattered. And that is the biggest, I think, no point in all of these applications. So that's why this matters. Acceptance rate at your top choices can be really low. You're looking at acceptance rates around 4 to 5%. So the margin of error is really tiny. The goal is not perfection. The goal is removing preventable mistakes so your child's profile shows up really confidently, coherently, and it can showcase a single narrative right across every document. Now, before we moving into the exact mistakes that I want to cover up, those 12 ones, I think it's really good that we need to see what US and UK is, a quick comparison between them. A lot of people would be re-attending these presentations of mine where I've discussed the UK in very great detail, the US in very great detail. Do also remember to access a lot of our content on YouTube. I'll also be sharing a couple of links for our newsletters. So if you want to go in detail just with USA and UK, you can access any of those links, and these part will make much more understanding for you. So let's have a quick snapshot, US versus UK, because the rules are different and the signals the university is looking for are very different. Before I get in, which you can see on the screen, there's one, I would say, law differentiation between USA and almost rest of the world. But for the screen perspective, the differentiation, core differentiation between a US application and UK application really lies in that major declaration. So remember, USA, it is not mandatory to declare a major during your applications, while in UK, as I was saying, just like in the rest of the world, that declaration is mandatory. Now, with that said, now you can see that on US side, the first thing that really comes across is think of it as a holistic review. They're not just judging only on academics. And again, that is being connected from that part that I spoke to you about, the major declaration. They will end up evaluating the full picture, the grades, the course rigor, very importantly, the activities that may or may not be connected to your majors, the essays in terms of personal statements, and eventual essays in college, personal statement and college essays, and the letters of recommendations. Now, as I was saying, the key point here is course selection flexibility. Oftentimes in USA, you would be having this room to explore, and declaring the major as is not mandatory at colleges at the time of application. You can apply undecided or exploratory and then decide this at the later stage in your undergraduation. So, of course, some programs, for example, some institutes, you may need to want to put engineering since, or finance or economics, if you have done a lot of structured activities around that area that you really want to speak or compound upon. But the overall understanding that you really need to think is the US system allows time for exploration before commitment. And finally, the US also runs through multiple platforms. You've got Common App, you've got UC portals, you've got Apply Texas, you've got the My MIT system, and also other institutes where you could just directly apply. So families often get confused because the mechanics vary, but the foundations again do remain similar. Now, on the UK side, it is one of those applications where I'll say you need to understand the course first. You're typically applying to a very specific program or a subject right from the start. If you go into the processes of UK again, your entrance exam do vary on the basis of the course that you've selected. And remember, in USA, you only have SAT ACT, regardless of the major you're doing, which again really, proves my point of me saying that the declaration of major in USA is not that important. But while looking into UK, you need to be very clear which university you're applying to, what entry exam you'd be giving on the basis of the degree that you are selecting, the program or the subject that you're selecting. So that means UK cares heavily about this one concept that we call academic fit and subject depth. And what you have done in that subject, how strong is your preparation, and how convincing is your motivation for that particular course. And in some cases, UK may also require specific course specific tests. It may also require you to do a couple of, pre-courses looking into the curriculum that you're coming for. So, for example, if you're applying for a medical degree and you're applying to a very selective college as Cambridge, and you have done your schooling from CBSE, you may need to even give 5 advanced placements in 5 various science related topics and get 5 out of 5 in all 5 of them. Obviously this can go in a complete different area if I start describing what is the AP, but it's just a college level course conducted by College Board by USA. But the results are very much used in UK as well because it's a complete academic endeavor. But regardless of medicine, you're doing those APs even for UK is quite strengthful because it's a very major oriented topic. It's an academic aspect. It really talks about your academic fit in the right way. And all of the kids on CBSE and ICSE, if you're applying for USA or applying for UK, doing these APs really does give you the right kind of international benchmarking. So the overall big key takeaway is that USA rewards a coherent full profile, while UK rewards clear subject commitment and depth. And mixing these two logics is where the big problems typically do start out. Now, while I've given you the overall look into US and UK, and I've said, if you want to go into extreme details of exactly what US and UK is, I would definitely suggest to access our YouTube channel. You could find a lot of content just on this part. And for the readers out there, we have put out a lot of those newsletters. So you could look into them, also giving you a complete description what you should expect from either of these countries' admission officers. Now, moving on to the real topic of today, the mistakes, the 12 mistakes, right? So we get on to the heart of the today's session. And I want you to keep one thing in mind as we go through these. Most of these mistakes are not obvious, right? They're not, they don't look like failures. In fact, many of them may look like my child is doing a lot, but in admissions, doing a lot isn't the same as doing the right thing in the right order. And at that one point, I'll also be coming onto this point, intellectual vitality, which in its real core word means not just doing a lot of things. So we'll go through these 12 mistakes, and for each one, I'll give you a fix that you could almost apply immediately. The goal is very practical. By the end of this session, you should be able to spot where these mistakes are happening at your home, in your profile, and what we can do in trying to make that corrected. So let's start with mistake number one of the most fundamental ones, which is delaying the foundation. And this one is the most expensive mistakes because admissions is not built in a year. The famous saying as it goes, Rome wasn't built in a day. The same thing, your applications are not just built in a couple of months. It is built through years, it's built through compounding. Kids who are in 11, largely they think if I'm not working with a counselor, so I haven't started building. That fact is not true. You have been doing a lot of activities, and in my later slides, you'll also realize how I really talk about that aspect, that it is about us while coming in those later years, not creating just new activities, but really having that right kind of introspection to what have you already done. But having said this, let's move into that first idea. Foundation comes first. If we wait until the serious years to begin, I really do put it across to parents that we end up spending those final years fixing basics rather than showing the right kind of depth. Now, the second part, where I will also, really talk about those serious years, the runaway starts even earlier, even before the recorded years. Now, what are the recorded years in terms of your US and UK? So, the recorded years largely what institute would say high school years. High school is grade 9 and beyond. So, the officially recorded years may begin later, but what happens before that is what really decides a student can hit the ground running, the skill building, the reading habits, the writing confidence, the early exploration, and the consistency. So by the time the official record starts, the student isn't just starting from zero, they're already building towards the momentum that can show depth, outcome, and progress. So do remember, within UK, within USA, if you're talking about activities per se in USA, if you're talking about even grades in UK or grades in USA, or those three questions that are largely used for the personal statement in UK, you are talking about activities from grade 9 and beyond, because that is the high school those universities are typically looking across from. So make sure that before this starts across, you have some kind of a fundamental idea of where you would like to take this profile forward. Exploration is very important. Now, the third idea is the recorded years should really reflect depth and progression. And that's why they take your grades right from grade 9, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And it's not something that, your 10th is more important than the ninth, or 11th has got a different weightage than ninth and 10th. All 3 years would be extremely important. And also do remember, when you apply to USA and UK, you are submitting your predictive grades. So for example, all of the students who are going in for the fall intake of 2027, your applications will start going, and I believe all of those kids would be in 11th today. All of those kids' applications would start moving from October, November of this year itself. And your 12 boards will be no way close. And your applications will be all submitted by next year of your Jan and Feb. And again, that is before you have even, given out your 12th exams. So universities want to see a student getting stronger over time. And, these grades getting stronger over time are the things that will make that predictive grade which you submit. As I just explained, you will not have your final score in your hand. You're largely using a representation of your 9th till 11th and creating a trajectory for your 12th, and also submitting the same thing at the same time. Now, moving across, when families start late, the outcomes are very much predictable. They are rushed tests. They tend to show shallow depth in activity, and most importantly, last minute essays. So nothing is wrong with the student. I'll be pretty much honest to you. It is simply a timeline problem. So here's where the parents really come into the picture. Plan early, and let have an official record capture the progress and not a panic. So that means pick a direction early, build consistency, and make sure each year looks like a next step up from the previous year. So that's the first thing that I would want to start across with, is always that delaying in foundation. Now, the second thing, which is very much important, and at this page, I'll also, introduce you to that aspect of intellectual vitality. So this is doing everything, mastering nothing. This is the classic busy student trap. A lot of families think that the safest approach is to stack activities. One course here, another internship there, a competition, a club, a summer program. And what is all this based on? You would have heard of someone, who got into a top university admission, and what you know about him, that he did submit an internship. You use that as a checklist. You would realize that someone has done an academic competition. You use that again as a checklist. The same thing in terms of a summer program. And all of a sudden, you've got a very full calendar. And yes, the profile may look quite broad, right? It may go into very different thing, but it would be very shallow. Admission readers don't reward the number of activities. They reward engagement. They reward progression. They want to see a pattern like, I learn, I commit, I lead, and then I create an impact. So, and if I'll say in short, I learn and I put a practical implementation. That progression is what signals maturity, direction, potential, and very much importantly, if you're doing this over a long time period, dedication. When a student is doing, let's say 10 things at 10% efficiency in each, there are no outcomes, no impact that you can point out to, no measurable result, no credible no leadership credibility, that really feels natural and intentional at the same time. It rather becomes a list of winnings or a list of participations, and not a narrative, not an engagement story. So the fix here is very simple. Pick up few commitments and build towards those outcomes. Those commitments should be very strongly connected to your overall narrative, to your overall positioning. So instead of asking, what else can we add? Try to ask yourself, how does this connect to my narrative? How can I deepen my narrative? And remember, how can I deepen my narrative? Using this activity is the thought process. Because, one activity with a clear output, a project, a publication, a leadership initiative, let's say a real result, is worth way more than putting out five different activities with just participation. Every activity needs to show a story, it needs to show engagement, and it needs to show enjoyment. And with that one part, I really want to take you to this next important slide. And this slide is there, in terms of an admission officer from really talking about this important term called intellectual vitality. So I'll just paraphrase this for you. That first paragraph, intellectual vitality is something which is not easy to define into clear terms and listed down in clear activities. It is something that you would identify. It takes various different forms. Just by doing a lot of APs, a lot of college courses, a lot of long-term papers and summer academic research projects, it does not guarantee A, if you see this part here, the distinctiveness in their application pool, nor does that show the active enjoyment and engagement in the learning process. What they're looking through these activities, definitely that engagement, definitely that long-term engagement. When you write in your common application, you've been doing this since grade 9, 10th, 11th. How many hours a week do you do it? How many weeks a year do you do it? That's where they're looking for that enjoyment and engagement. They're looking for a person who has significantly taken responsibility over that learning process. They have shown maturity and self-discipline in fulfillment of a project, often well beyond the limitations of a school assignment. They showcase a nature or a personality that you're willing to take up more challenges when no one has mandated it for you. So that's where that selection beyond just doing the activity becomes extremely and excessively important. Now, while we keep, and I'll say, keep this again, intellectual vitality thought in your mind while we are discussing over this next slide, the next mistake directly connected to those activities, it is then treating extracurriculars as resume padding. So, this is when activities are chosen primarily because they sound impressive. Not because they connect to the students' real interest or direction. They are largely taken up as inspiration by X application that you may have heard of, has been admitted into a university and who's doing that specific activity. So remember that part of intellectual curiosity that I just spoke about. In the US especially, college aren't just going to be admitting a transcript. They're admitting a person, they're admitting a personality who will live on campus, contribute to the community, and grow into the leadership with the university together. They want to know what will you be contributing to this institute, and not just saying that you are coming here to take contribution from them. So they look for students who live full, productive lives beyond just those academic grades, beyond just those test scores, and are willing to speak to the admission officers from this perspective that, hey, while you're selecting this cohort of colleges, for example, even computer science, you've also declared that, but what more do you bring into this classroom beyond that math score, beyond that Java, beyond that Python? Have you taken any of these activities from the community service perspective? Have you tried to think about all of this, but brought in a natural inclination towards sports and music to the same aspect as well? What more can you give to this classroom? And you should always remember this admission officer trying to create a classroom with students from various different specialities. So what actually stands out is not these are the 10 or 20 things that I have done. What stands out is a personal passion paired with innovative leadership. By innovative leadership, I mean something where you have started the activity on yourself. I'm not talking about institutional leadership of head boys and head girls or leading a club, but what have you gone ahead and contributed and impacted from your own existence? So in other words, what did the student care about enough to stick with? What did they build? Who did they help? And what changed because they were involved personally? What was that impact that came across? And here's an important nuance. Leadership isn't about school titles that I was saying. It is not that institutional leadership that I'm talking about. A student should be creating leadership, that innovative leadership, a project, a club, an initiative, a new community program, a new product per se as well. A self-created leadership can be as strong as, let's say being captain or a president. And it goes beyond by saying it shows that initiative and ownership on the event impact. So that last part that I had said, those in the other words, what changed because you were involved, is that major question that they're consistently looking across at all of those extracurriculars. So don't just try to create a list of winnings. Try to see how has that activity contributed to the world around you? What are you trying to build? Who have you helped with everything that you're doing? Because what they are seeing is how are you going to come into my university and how are you going to be contributing? So those, activities are going to be running in that specific way. So ask, does this activity connect to my child in who he wants to become? Can I show measurable, impactful outcomes? Because in admissions, coherence and outcome impact will beat decoration. Now we move on to the next mistake, which is mistake number four, a very common one. And obviously at times I'd also say are affected by overzealous admission counselors, over editing essays until the student's own natural voice has disappeared. This one happens with actually very good intentions. Parents, counselors, they want to help. They want the essay to become perfect. But in that process, the essay stops sounding like a teenager and it starts sounding like an adult. And if you go back to the reason why someone is an admission officer selected for this job, he knows how to identify this. And that is what the admission officer tries to feel out in every essays. They have read thousands of essays. They know what a 16 to 17-year-old would sound like. And they know when an essay has been heavily fixed. The risk is that the essay loses one thing, which is it actually supposed to show, which is authenticity, right? The whole function of any activity isn't to showcase it with a certificate. It is to show authenticity with a genuine voice of what happened to you when you were doing it. How did that really impact you? So that natural voice is supposed to be there. Strong essays, as I'm saying, are not then just, supposed to be necessarily fancy. You're not supposed to find the most difficult words in the English dictionary and put it out there. They're supposed to be natural, it's supposed to be specific and honest. They are supposed to have, that students' rhythm behind it. A student's own observations should be coming through with it, and the student's personality. The goal is not just to sound impressive, not to sound, as I would say, a lot of people here in India would understand, to sound like Shashi Tharoor in any of those documents. The goal is to sound as real and as memorable. And even if you're using very simple words, try to see this as a very simple mode of communication, where, for example, whatever you are thinking is what you are writing. And what you are writing is exactly being very simply read by the admission officer. And that exactly becomes what he's thinking. So what you thought becomes what he thought. If these two matches, communication on the level of this personal statement and essays and overall application is through. It's not that good communication means difficult English words. Good communication means clarity of thought being put across. So here's the right role for, I'd say, parents or any counselors on the call. Edit for clarity and structure, not for personality. You can help by asking, let's say, good questions, checking if the story makes sense, spot repetition, tighten the flow. But the student's own narrative must be the aspect behind, the whole application. The student must remain the author. The simple rule is, if you read the essay and think, this sounds like me, or for example, as a parent, that this sounds like my kid, you are perfectly well. But as a parent, if you're reading this and it say that, this sounds like me, it's gone too far. The best essays feel like a conversation with the student, not a polished corporate statement, right? You're not polishing it out to win an essay competition. Again, even with the essay competition, I'll say the same thing. It needs to come out straight from the student's voice. Now, number five, late recommendations, weak teachers context. This is one of those mistakes that families underestimate, because recommendations just feel like a checkbox. It almost just feels like, because that's the only document I'm not writing, I can hand over that problem to the teacher to look at, and it will be done, and you're largely looking at it as a checkbox. And all, do remember, now we're getting to that one document, that the only document that you do not write. So how do we get the best letter or a best document? By very subtly and not very directly moving the hand of the teacher, because that's also unethical. You can't give a full letter of recommendation and they just need to copy paste it. But now, to understand these selective universities, recommendations can be that real differentiation maker between a strong student and a must admit, because they add the right amount of credibility, and they bind that whole application together in that one form. So do remember, your letter of recommendation should go beyond generic, should be specific. All those letters of recommendations that talk about a student behaves well, exams well, fares well, good contributor to class, are very generic, are the example of your bad letters of recommendations. Now, with that said, three couple of things that we should be looking at. The first problem is always been of timing. If you ask the teacher or identify the teacher too close to those deadlines, you're really competing with those dozens of other requests. Even a very supportive teacher will try to default onto that safe kind of template that I just spoke about, exams well, behaves well, generic statements. So the letter becomes polite, positive, and then very unfortunately forgettable, because there's all generic information in it. And in a competitive application pool, a forgetful application is not the outcome you want to go for. Second problem, the wrong teacher. Many students choose recommenders based on seniority rather than understanding your own profile. So, not just based, so you shouldn't just pick up a letter of recommendation on the part just saying that the person is a senior teacher, a senior professor, may have a beyond school reputation that you want to really horn into. Don't do that. Try to find a teacher that best understands you, that he understands your overall profile. So beyond those grades, as you can see in point number two, he brings that student out into life. And the only way that can happen is if you've selected a teacher who knows you to its core. And regardless, he may just be your class teacher, may just be a simple person, may not be, your directors in the not be the your principal from the school, but can really give that personalized approach to this whole application. The third part is missing context. Teachers are not mind readers. Remember that. Teachers may not be able to remember everything that you're doing without you having that proper communication set with them. So make sure that your teacher is being fed over the years with various different information on your growth, on your various aspect. If you're one of those kids that going to have a shift in, let's say grade 11, make sure that you have been able to give indirectly a lot of different kind of documents that could be called brag sheets in a certain sense, where you're trying to go across with a showcase a research that you have done, discuss the internship that you've been participating on, discuss academic competitions, and also discuss all of your non-extracurricular activities with your teacher. So when the teacher sits down, the teacher can have concrete examples to write about. That's the point that you can see on the screen. And the way that you can achieve it is firstly understanding, right? Your teacher is not a mind reader. Make sure that you have been sharing as much as activities, with that teacher, giving the teacher a very good understanding over your overall, background. So equip the teacher would really mean that your child gives that simple package, not a long document, just enough to write a strong letter. For example, in some institutes or schools, I mean, a one-page brag sheet is something that you need to submit across. Try to put across 3 to 4 class moments or projects that the teacher may be speaking on. Put out an evidence of growth in this document, what improved and how did that happen, what the student is trying to aim for, and academically what are your thought processes can become that part of that brag sheet. Put in 2 to 3 traits that the students really wants to highlight and wants to really create as that differentiating factor. So the simple way to think about it, you're not just asking a teacher to do you a favor. You're helping the teacher to tell the most accurate, the most vivid story about yourself. And obviously, all of that I'm saying in terms of a parent, that is what you need to tell your kid to do, and make sure that he's running around the same way. So the teacher, where you're getting that eventual letter of recommendation, understands your kid to a certain level where you're moving way beyond just those generic statements of exams well, behaves well, and fares well. So if you remember one line, don't treat recommendations like paperwork, treat them like proof. Because in admissions, that's exactly what they're looking for. And always remember, your letter of recommendation is the binding tool that an admission officer will be using to really take your activities, the personal statement and essay into one single application. What the admission officer wants to do is go through all of these various documents submitted by you, put it aside, read your letter of recommendation, and without reading your name on the letter of recommendation, the admission officer is supposed to understand the document has been written for this one specific student. Now, moving on to the next mistake, which is mistake number 6, a messy test strategy, right? Wrong timing, wrong priorities. This is where families lose months, not marks. The student ends up preparing constantly, but never in a clean, focused window. And that creates the burnout. It creates those score stagnations and unnecessary stress. The first mistake, I'd rather put across, and the most important is the scheduling one, the wrong scheduling of SAT, ACT, and various UK admission tests that you may need to take happening in the same week as, let's say a major school exam. That almost guarantees an underperformance because, the brain can't peak at everything at the same time. The skills required for different kind of test environments may be totally different. You may end up being in a very wrong time frame. You may be in a very different mind frame while attempting SAT, while that mind frame, is totally, focused in terms of your school major exams, and that doesn't get that right kind of a score. And the second mistake is confusing what matters for which countries. So for USA, families often obsess over these test days without really building a realistic plan for academics, for activities and essays. What they typically start thinking is that joint entrance methodology, that what we will do is we'll start, preparing for this SAT in grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, even before that syllabus is done, just to make sure that we can get the perfect SAT score, and assuming getting that perfect SAT score is, what will help you get through with all of this. So overall, choosing the right smart testing window, making sure that you have left enough time to focus on your academic growth in those growth years, getting the right profile depth, not getting too early into those entrance exams, and coming out with that right kind of a strategy. When do you give the UK? When do you give the US exam? Where do those APs come through? When are those college programs coming through? That is the core part out, that messy test strategy we need to avoid. Make sure you have looked at all of those various things when you are deciding the times of these various exams. Now, moving on to the other part, misreading the UK game. Of course, this is also one thing that I also want to put across. The UK game has also been seen as a pure academic in terms of saying that, it is only the scores that would get you through. That is not true. It's not just those grades or scores. You have to work on these different aspects beyond those grades as well. And again, they need to be course specific, right? So imagine in a case scenario, those three questions that you need to be taking up. Why do you do this course? What have you done academically to explore it? What evidence that you can show beyond your school that really gets you ready for this course? So the three questions that I've pointed out are the personal statement questions of the UCAS application. While you're answering these applications, you are talking about extracurriculars. But the only thing is that they are matched to your activities or your major. So we call it a super curricular. So for example, if you're applying to UK for computer science, it's not just to say that your entrance exam would be important or your scores in maths and computer science and physics would be important. But if you have done an internship in that area, have you done a summer program in that area? Have you, looked at a bigger academic competition, for example, Olympiad within the degree that you're looking across for? Have you taken online courses and summer programs to in-depth your learning that you're already getting from those schools? And this is that exact place doing those APs, even being a US college course, really makes a lot more sense in terms for UKs. And these tests are, comparable worldwide, and having and looking into those test scores at the right time is going to be also very important, and they don't contribute to your UCAS tariff points. Also, do remember that part. And eventually, your application should show some depth and clear program fit, which is done through those various activities that I was talking to you about. And remember, there are a reference list and not a checklist. It's not that every student needs to do a research and internship, a summer program, academic competitions and courses. You need to find what mixes best with your story and your narrative while creating that UK story behind it. Now, moving forward from misreading the UK game, ignoring the financial planning and the aid strategies. So this is one of the biggest silent killers in admissions, because families do everything right academically. And then in grade 12, they suddenly realize, wait, how do we actually pay for all of this? And then by then, a lot of those best options are either gone or those timelines are too tight. So the first issue is many families treat cost like a last minute problem. The cost is not the last minute problem or the last minute thing. It's it's a overall strategy constraint. Just like time is a constraint, budget is also a constraint, right? We always talk about the time value of money. So if you don't plan around it early, you end up applying blindly, or you apply to the wrong mix of universities, and the final offers would not match what the family can typically afford for. Top universities again will miss have various different kind of aid programs. So we end up misunderstanding which are the ones that you're going to be looking across at. So for example, within USA itself, they've got two kinds of scholarship. They've got the need blind, they've got the need based, right? The need blind scholarship, which is largely there for international students, is not going to be looking at your financials while giving you the admission. They will be looking at the meritoriousness. So from that Indian perspective, need blind scholarships can be compared to merit based scholarships. But do remember, for international students, this is not the, I said, the more repeated one that you'll find in different universities. Majority US universities will be looking at need-based scholarships. Now, how these ones work? You are first really evaluated for on terms of admissions. If you are someone in term with your grades, your profile, your activities that deserves the admission, you would be getting the scholarship based on the financial standing of your parent. So do make sure that you understand the differentiation between both of these options. Understand the list of the universities that you're applying for, which is the kind of scholarship they'll be going for. So do remember, if you're applying for need-based scholarship and by mistake you haven't seen the financial restrictions around that and your family is above that limit, you would also forego your admission by making that mistake. So for example, Columbia University may have a certain threshold of the family's financial status. If you're above that threshold, and even if you're applicable to be admitted, just because you're getting rejected for the admission for the scholarship, you have also foregone your admission itself. So make sure that you're applying to the right set of universities depending the circumstances that you're around on. Now, the third issue is deadlines. Financial aid is not just about, let's say, the submitting the application when it comes. There are forms, there are documents, there are timelines, and in many, consideration, there are also some certain pre-done activities. For example, APs. If many scholarships may ask you for your AP scholar status, and if you find out about the AP scholar being a status in grade 12, you do not have time to do 3 to 5 APs. And remember, APs is done just once a year. And obviously, you cannot just do all five at together, or anywhere between 2 to 3 becomes quite challenging. Two is very realistic number, but three is quite tough. And the part that I was saying, an application may ask you what is your status in terms of being an AP scholar. AP scholar means having three APs. AP scholar with merit is having four APs. AP scholar with distinction means having five APs. So the stronger, your status, the stronger or the higher probability of you getting that scholarship. So knowing all of these restrictions, knowing what these colleges are going to be looking across at that scholarship, right at the same time when you have decided that list of colleges, decided when you're doing that SAT exam, almost at the start of or end of your grade 11th or start of your 12th, you should also be thinking exactly in those terms. Do not delay in understanding the financial planning as early as possible. Mistake number 9, chasing brownie points and not building a strong narrative. This is one of the most common, I would say, counselor, parent, and external information driven mistakes. And it usually comes from, obviously a good place in the heart. Parents or scholar or your counselors would want to protect the child. So they try to collect whatever sounds impressive. A branded internship. I've seen that a lot of times. People going out and just buying an internship from a reputable brand. And at the end of the day, realizing the university is not just looking across at the brand in which you have done the internship, but the depth in which you have gone for. Or, getting aligned to a very reputable research person, where the admission officer is actually realizing that, this work and this research is done by the person. It's only your name being written across on it. So don't go for such activities. But what the admission officer and what the admissions officers don't like is that point system, right? In both US and UK, what really wins is the coherence. Don't try to win those brownie points. So the strongest applications feels like is one connected story. Your academics, your activities, writing across all the points in that same sense of why. That why should connect all of these various activities. So when a student chases brownie points, the profile becomes a shopping cart of unrelated experiences. And the reader's question becomes, so who is the student actually? Everything is being spread across in various different ways. So what are you actually trying to building across is something which is lost. So if the answer isn't clear in 30 seconds, this is where your application totally loses its power. That is when your application is totally in various different ways. So the fix here is try to pick up one or two strong themes, narratives, and build the outcomes over time in this simple line. One would say 18 months, 24 months, or at least 12 months is something that we could look across to work on those narrative ways in the right manner. A lot of times, also for those kids that are currently 11th and thinking, oh gosh, my application is just now 10 or 11 months away. problem. The only thing that I'll really suggest you to do is before you start thinking where to apply, what to create, do give some weeks just understanding where is your narrative has built across from grade 9 to today, and then take it forward, right? Then understand in terms of, am I a kid who can mix up health and tech? Am I a student who could mix up economics, mathematics, and computer sciences, right? Computer sciences, data analytics. Can I mix up design and sustainability? Can I bring in community and computing and community service together? So you're trying to show growth in multiple areas connected to you at every spot. So within the theme, the student really needs to show progression from, as I even said before, learn, build, test, lead, and move over to that showcasing of that publishing or impact part. So that's what really creates the narrative, and not just throwing in strong brand names various across different activities. Now, moving on to mistake number 10, which is treating activities like a checklist and misweighing those extracurriculars. So what family and school counselors start collecting buckets, right? As I've been saying repetitively, research, internships, summer programs, competitions, sports, music, one of each. And the profile would look busy, it would look broad, but it will also look very shallow to be read. So the admissions doesn't really score on labels, it scores on evidence. What did the student build? What did he lead? What did he achieve or change? That is what would create the depth. And also don't misweight your extracurriculars. Academic extracurriculars shows intellectual readiness, it shows intellectual curiosity, it shows non-academic, and it also shows case your endeavor to expand your educational knowledge beyond the mandatory things that are out there. And extracurriculars would also add that extra dimension, will also add that extra depth in those various areas. Now, the 11th point is assuming USA requires a locked major. Now, do remember, and I've also said that initially, it is not mandatory to have a locked major in your application. And also to say that, declaring your major is a problem. What you need to understand on these various universities is what strategy is going to fit you specifically. What degree are you looking for? I mean, I'll always do say students in STEM and engineering do end up doing a lot of very specific activities in which declaring your major can also be a benefit or a boon while getting through with these applications. So, having that very clear strategy of declaration and non-declaration of major is something that you need to look across. Don't go by just certain narratives. You need to have a personalized approach in this aspect. Last mistake, and a very frequent mistake that I have seen people coming across today. And obviously today's uncertain political environment has made parents make this decision a little bit too early of deciding, am I going for USA or UK? This is a strategic mistake. Again, it's not an academic one. Students, families, they end up taking this decision too quick before even understanding, does my student fit into USA or UK, and vice versa kind of situation. We don't understand if the student is someone who may be faring well coming across as an academic application and is, or in that sense, an overall application of holistic development. So be very clear in that aspect. What are you looking for? One of my core suggestions has always been that US applications, and if you'll go through those YouTube videos and those newsletters, you will tend to realize that the US is a superset of the applications, and the subset of these applications is that UK one. So, make sure that you're using US as early as possible to create a broad profile for yourself, have every document created for USA, and keep your UK applications in mind, mapped out. So you could just simply pick up your US applications and put it across for your UK. And till the end day, till you start your 12th, you don't need to make this decision and close on to your options. During your application phase, it is important to keep as many as opportunities open. Try to throw a net that is as broad as possible. And once you have bought the ships on board, you can make this decision. But having said this, also do remember that your UK application can also be treated as as a super application. For example, if your rest of applications are running in Germany, if you're also looking at South Korea, if you're also looking at Australia and Singapore, all of those universities and application models also does become a very beautiful fit or a sub fit under UK. So what you need to realize is understand which grade are you in, What activities have you done? Do I treat USA as my superset application? Do I set UK as my superset application? Try to reach out for the stars, and then the sky, if you're also going for a Singaporean application, if you're going for a German application, will be the part of that endeavor. A quick look at the do's and the don'ts, the last part of our major, of the presentation itself. I think will be done in the next 4 to 5 minutes once I'm gone through with our approach and I have taken you through, our various resources that I share with my students. So we're just almost on the last slide of the main presentation itself, which is to really talk about the parents' role here. So the headline here is very intentional. The structure and the support is important, but not parental control. Because the best outcomes happen when the student has worked on his own and the parent owns the system around the work. The do's on this side is first provide structure, think calendar, think deadlines, and simple weekly check-in, not daily micromanagement. Just a predictable rhythm so nothing becomes a last minute activity. Second, encourage independence and celebrate the progress. Admissions is a long game and confidence compounds. And this is where I really push across a lot of parents and students to do a few summer program applications before you get into that real deal and celebrate that ownership, that achievement itself. When students feel trusted, they take that ownership, and that ownership shows up in those interviews, those essays, and the various other outcomes that you'd be doing. Third, protect the well-being. A lot of times I say it's not about just forcing the kid to do everything and having a complete burnout even before you start. So balancing sleep, balancing stress management is a very good thing to have within your profile. They directly affect grades, test performance, consistency. And as I've been saying, a burnout student can't build a lot of depth, and it's not the situation you want to be in before you're getting admitted. And the do not sides, do not rewrite your essays in your voice. Make sure that you're only there for support and not to restructure everything. Don't overload the schedule, for just college per se. You're not a person who needs to find success at a university. More hours don't automatically mean more impact. Depth needs time, and student needs breathing room to think and to create in the right way. And lastly, don't compare relentlessly to other students. That is that whole problem in those activity lists going around. That's a whole problem in trying to put just too much on the plate that the student cannot actually consume, and not treating your student as an individual kid and benchmarking them against everyone. And at the end of the day, what you really create is another brick in the wall. Now, close with that, what is our approach? Now we're just going to be concluding it. And at the end of this presentation, I will leave you with a QR code that you could typically sign into. And we would be able to take all of this various information and showcase this preparation timeline to you on an individualistic manner. So one of those key aspects in grade 9, grade 10th, where we're helping students understand, so these mistakes are not made and start as early as possible, is to understand those interests, help you build those strengths, make you join courses, clubs, participate at competition. Consistently, what we do during those build up years is do a personal voice, make you work on various documents that could feel like personal statement creation by asking you those questions. Why do you do an activity? How does it impact you? What is the story that we're trying to create around every objective that we create? So once you move into grade 11, we will help you in, selecting subjects, help you with those capstone projects, competitions. We provide the complete support in terms of standardized testing, that November to December of 11th, and eventually the March of that 11th year as well. Once you move into your 12th, we will help you with that final personal draft of the personal statement. We'll help you to initiate essays, close those various activities in the perfect way. And in your 12th year, the October, the November, go through with the early applications. Jan, we help you with the regular applications, make the selections on those positive outcomes, and we would conclude on visa application. So everything from the word go to the conclusion till the visas is something that we take up. Now, just to show the work that we do in different headings, so the academic and test preps, the profile building, and the admissions preparation, all of that under one roof, so that one-stop shop solution for everything related to you to get into a top university. Just to now show you a couple of success stories of students who have this process with us. This is a kid who got admitted into Dartmouth. Again, you can see a very holistic approach to this kid's application, a talented solo singer, performed at various charity events, founded an NGO, national level basketball player, participated on an essay competition in Oxford. He's got a SAT score of 1550 and, did very well even in those school examinations. And eventually the student had a strong enough profile and accomplishments to get into Dartmouth. A very different kind of a journey for Rice University again. But again, that is that whole aspect that you can even see here, the diverse extracurriculars that really led to the student to that top university. Now, the resources that we do share, and that was the part that I was saying, that all of those parents that are also very much interested in that US UK angle, you could connect with us again. Next weekend, we'll be taking up another topic within admissions, and we'll be helping you to understand, how to move forward in those various aspects. Now, use the QR code on the bottom of your screen now, where you could get in touch and look into those different newsletters on different topics. Again, even also focused in US, UK, much more broad, specific activity list, a document just created to say what colleges should you be applying to, effectiveness list. So you could find a lot of topic specific content in these newsletters. You could also use these other two QR codes, one that will connect you to YouTube, where you could find a lot of, again, top information related to admissions. The QR code on your right really gets you into a WhatsApp community where we the people posting, and we put a lot of information out there for admissions. Students who need a SAT diagnostic test done, you can use your QR code on the screen just now, and you could get done a SAT diagnostic where we can help you to perfect 800 on that digital SAT reading and writing. And by the way, all of the ones who would have taken the QR code on this time can also get access to that same newsletter in terms of how to get an 800 in your 800 in your SAT section. And we can do that also through a SAT diagnostic where I could give you a very personalized understanding to your overall profile. Last slide, where you could also just connect here, where we could run you through this journey of understanding where you are currently at and help you to avoid all of those generic mistakes that students typically get into. Right, so this is the end of our presentation now. Now we would be moving across to the questions that we are seeing, and I'll be typically answering them. So I've got two questions already ready for me. Is it worth doing APs for IBs? Yes, 110%. It is definitely worth doing AP for IB. And with all due respect to IB schools, there's a certain amount of misrepresentation of APs at IBs. What I have actually seen why this misrepresentation has happened in a very fair sense. Majority of your top IB teachers are actually ex-CBSE professors. And how CBSE has been looking into APs is that it gives you an international benchmarking. That's what they've been always been saying. Do an AP with a CBSE because it gives you international benchmarking. Once this teacher moves over to IB, they realize that, okay, international benchmarking to ho gaya. We have got international benchmarking. Then what's the worth of doing an AP? And the problem is you've got a very myopic look to it. AP is a college level course by US universities. So it's not a 12th level course. So it can never be as a straightforward equivalent to IB. IB is grade 12. Secondly, if you get 5 out of 5, for example, in calculus BC, Stanford is going to give you 10 credits. Stanford is going to give you two courses in the beginner's level that you can skip. So, for example, if you're doing maths AAHL in IB, you're not going to get 10 credits in Stanford. It's not like you can skip over two courses at Stanford. The only thing that in calculus BC may not provide you while you're doing IB, AA, maths, HL is global benchmarking, because your AA maths HL would have the same content. So if you're only thinking in terms of global benchmarking and doing AP, so obviously maths AA is a global benchmark paper. It's got the same kind of syllabus as your maths AA, but your IB will not give you 10 credits. Your IB will not allow you to finish your undergraduation quicker. Secondly, you cannot become an AP scholar just by doing by doing IB. So if you're looking at all of those different objectives for AP while being on IB, definitely go ahead and do a couple of APs. They will definitely help you across. Another point, you have got 6 subjects in IB. You may have a seventh or eighth interest. Do an AP. Broadens your perspective and narrative, but only go down that route if you're getting a 40 out of 42 or a 39 out of 42. That's going to be important, right? It doesn't make sense you're sitting at 33, 34 out of a 45, 42, and you're trying to, do extra subject. Be sure at your core six subjects and then try to go for depth firstly in those subjects, breadth at a later stage. But all of those previous reasons are again very useful for you to take APs even on being on IB. Secondly, what about non-academic recommendations? I suppose what Archana is asking, I'll try to answer this from two perspectives. It's this question on letter of recommendation. So yeah, you can take non-academic letter of recommendations as well. That's absolutely fine. It doesn't have to be from a school teacher. B, what I think this question may be really addressing is, what do I recommend for your non-academic activity? Now, that can go into community service. You can do those. You could look at sports. You could look at music. You could look at fine arts. You could look at any other kind of art. You could look at public speaking. You could look at theater, dance. There's a student who used Rubik's cubing. There's an application that I've worked with trekking. Anything under the sky that can show dedication, that could show time commitment, that can be used for personality creation, regardless of an existence of a certificate, you can use it. So anything under the sky is good for non-academic recommendation, but do remember it should show purpose, it should show dedication, and all of those points that I was pushing across while we were talking about those extracurricular activities. Now, just I've closed up these two questions. Are there any other questions that people would have? I would be happy to have them answered now. If none, then we would conclude our session today. I'll just give another 5-10 seconds for this. And meanwhile, you could use the QR code on your screen to, just access all of it. Right. So thank you for joining us across today. We're done for our session. I think there is one question, ma'am, but I think your question is, may I know about LORs? I think the LORs, pose the presentation would only just say it is the verification document, a document much more sensitive than a certificate. See, a certificate can prove your level of participation in an activity, right? That's what a certificate does. But a letter of recommendation can show engagement and enjoyment. While getting it, make sure that it's a very personalized document and it's not something which is, just exams well, behaves well, kind of a generic statement about you. The admission officer should be able to read your letter of recommendation without seeing your name and identify the application in terms of the letters of recommendation and all of that, that it's been written for the same person. That's how much it is personalized. How many is required? Try to build up 3 to 4. Two from your teachers, get one from your counselor, and preferably see trying to build something from your extracurricular sports, music, or any place else. And as you said, who should give it? My always point is someone who knows you to its best, someone who can really give a personalized letter, not someone with a high designation. The letter of recommendation person is not going for the admissions, you are. His designation does not impact your personality. Him describing your personality affects your personality. So see it from that perspective. Now, okay, so I think, yeah, that's it with the questions. We'll just be concluding off for today. We went over the time. Quite exciting to see so many of you guys stuck up with me towards the end. I would just request, do sign up for this one-on-one session so I could take you up further. Is it not now not necessary from the school? And one part I'll just ask Priya if you could, just have a one-on-one session, use the QR code on the screen. I think you missed a couple of the parts that we had covered. I will take you through this whole presentation and all of your personalized questions. So just do request the person who connect with you to connect you directly with me for ours. Right, that's my name. I'm sure I didn't miss it. I'm the co-founder with the organization. So you can directly connect with me and I'll take up all of these questions one-on-one. Sure. Thank you for joining across. It was a really nice session getting to interact. Obviously, one-way communication, but I'm sure a lot of you guys would be coming across and joining us into those one-on-one sessions. Thank you.